Welcome, everyone. I'm Colleen Murphy-Dunning. I am the director of the Hixon Center for Urban Ecology at the Yale School of the Environment, and it is my honor to kick off this series entitled Sustainable Municipalities, Innovative Practices and Emerging Trends in the United States. We've organized this series in collaboration with the Yale Urban Learning Community and the Sustainable States Network and Sustainable Connecticut. I'll have the privilege of introducing today's speakers in just a minute, but first, a quick housekeeping for our audience to let you know that as we are in a webinar format, we will take written questions through the Q&A function, and then I will raise your questions aloud to our speakers following their presentations. In addition, beyond their a quick time of Q&A beyond their individual talks, we will also have ample time to continue the discussion and Q&A with all three speakers following the third presentation. To kick off today's introduction of the series, we're joined by Associate Dean for Professional Practice, Professor Brad Gentry. Brad's work explores the opportunity for using private investment to improve environmental performance. He works both across and within particular sectors and problems. The cross-sectoral work focuses on the steps policymakers can take to help develop opportunities for sustainable investments, including market frameworks, information systems, and shared investment partnerships. His sectoral work is concentrated in three major areas: increasing private investment in the delivery of urban environmental services, sustainable forest management, and cleaner energy. Projects in all these areas are undertaken across a range of contexts, from New Haven to developing megacities and to wilderness forest systems. He has written extensively on the links between private investment and environmental performance, including the book Private Capital Flows and the Environment Lessons from Latin America. So it's my honor now to pass the mic to Brad Gentry.
Thank you very much, Colleen, and I'm delighted to be here today. I thought I'd kick things off by offering a few thoughts on networks, communities, and inspiration. First, on networks. No one person can make municipalities sustainable on their own. You have to have networks of supporters and actors. For example, Sustainable CT had over 200 volunteers from all of Connecticut's 169 towns in working to develop the menu of action items for its certification program, which is designed to yield 8 major types of benefits for certified municipalities, from climate resilience to cost savings to healthy and equitable communities. That needs lots of folks involved across areas of expertise and ability to make progress, and that can only be done through networks. Second, when thinking about sustainable municipalities, local or community context really matters. We often talk about national or global actions needed to address environmental, social, and economic issues, but many critically important responses happen at the community level, and increasingly communities are being looked to for solutions. Think about the housing crisis or efforts to adapt to climate change. All will be intensely local, which is why Sustainable CT's Community Match crowdfunding program is so important, because it enables community groups to pursue funding directly for the actions they see as critical to their members. It's often said that progress is made at the speed of relationships, and that's certainly true at the community level. But if that's the case, it does raise the question about how such local actions can address the urgency of the national and global problems we face. Meaning, can we scale solutions up across locations quickly enough to make a difference? Seems to me that this question takes us back to networks and the inspiration they can provide. Given that context matters, it's unlikely that we can adopt others' solutions wholesale, but others' work can spark our own ideas and give us confidence that progress can be made. For example, Sustainable CT both contributes to and takes inspiration from other members of the Sustainable States Network. As Lynn recently said to me, being able to learn from well-established programs in other states allowed Sustainable CT to leapfrog over some startup challenges and move more quickly to fill gaps that existing programs had only just identified. In addition, they can work with colleagues to find ways to share data and other resources, which makes their work even more efficient and effective. As Lynn says, working with a Sustainable States Network moves Sustainable CT's program from local actions with statewide impacts to national impacts as well. As a result, I'm delighted to join today's panel and very much looking forward to hearing more details from both Lynn and Lola. Many thanks.
Thanks so much, Brad. Right now, we don't have any questions in our open queue, so I'm going to presume we're going to get really into a deeper conversation after our other speakers present. And so I'd like to now introduce Lynn Stoddard. Lynn is the founder and director of Sustainable Connecticut, a program that inspires, supports, and celebrates actions that make our communities great places for all to live. From affordable housing to vibrant public spaces, walkable and safe roads, inclusive municipal decision-making, and support for local businesses, Sustainable CT helps Connecticut towns and cities improve the quality of life for every resident. Created by towns for towns, the program is coordinated and administered by the Institute for Sustainable Energy at Eastern Connecticut State University. Thanks to Lynn for helping to organize this series and for helping to kick off today's talks.
Thanks, Colleen, and thank you, Brad. I am going to share some slides here and walk you through an example of a municipal certification program using Sustainable CT. And then we'll talk a little bit at the end about the value of networks for us in starting and running our program. So here we go. Sustainable CT is an example of a municipal certification that program that has kind of three common elements. We provide a roadmap of best practices for towns, resources to help towns implement those best practices or actions, and then recognition through a certification program. So we'll walk through each of those steps. And I guess I'll also make the point here that Sustainable CT and the 13 or so other programs within our Sustainable States Network are all starting with the theory of change, that change at the local and community level is really the driver for broader behavior and systems change within our society and our nation. And as Brad said, one of the really fundamental pieces of Sustainable CT is that municipal voice that we were developed for towns by towns. So here's a little bit about that roadmap of actions. Sustainable CT defines sustainability very broadly. You're seeing the 12, what we call our categories, our impact categories. Within each of these 12 categories, there are 10, 12, 15 specific actions that towns can take to realize these visions. So some of the other programs in our network, our municipal certification programs, may focus more on just climate or energy, but ours has a very broad voice, a broad look. And as we said, as Brad mentioned, over 200 people from every town in Connecticut worked to develop these categories and these actions that made sense for Connecticut. And we like to stress that all of these impact categories and all of these decisions and actions towns can take are interrelated. We sometimes use the term multi-solving. That was coined by our friends at Climate Interactive. When you do something to help create healthy, efficient, and diverse housing, for example, you are also creating a much more livable, inclusive, and equitable community where people then have access to better jobs and basic needs once they've satisfied the housing need. So the interconnection between all these areas is important. And I guess to sum up how we view sustainability, you see these categories here. It's really all the things that make our communities healthy places to live for all and provide opportunities for all people to thrive. So we're going to dig down into what these actions are and how it actually translates for the towns who are participating in the program. So at the left, you see a screenshot from our website. Those are the 13 categories 12 we saw on the previous slide. We're going to take a look at an example from category 7, which is the energy category. And we'll take a look at action 7.2, reducing energy across all municipal buildings, just so you can kind of see how this works. Before we jump to that example, I'll just say that these 6 actions on the right under the energy category are not all of them. There are a bunch more. So just imagine the expansion of all 12, 13 categories with multiple actions. It's 183 different actions that have opportunities for points. So lots of best practices for towns. The other thing I want to point out on this slide is the first category is equity and inclusion. And that is a foundation of our program, and in fact, the only required action in the program. So every town, in order to achieve certification, must use an equity lens when they look at their community. We can talk more about that in a little while. Of the other categories, towns can choose one action within the category. So they have to do at least one action in each category, but they must do the equity action. So just again, digging in a little deeper into like, what do these actions mean? How does this work? So each of the actions in the roadmap has this pretty extensive write-up, which tells a town the steps, what to do. So in this case, towns are tracking data, benchmarking energy use in all their town's buildings, their schools, their town halls, their libraries, their fire halls, and tracking that through EPA's program called Portfolio Manager in order to get credit for reducing energy use across all municipal buildings. They actually have to show data and performance metrics that show a 10%, 20%, 30% or more reduction in energy use across all buildings over time. So this is a very performance-driven action. It's based on energy units and BTUs. We can translate those impacts into greenhouse gas reductions, cost savings, and so on. The other thing I want to point out about the kind of anatomy of our actions is each one has a list of funding sources, resources to help implement the action, and Connecticut's success stories. So what other towns in Connecticut have done to implement this action successfully. So that's the action roadmap part. The second thing I mentioned was resources to help towns implement these actions. And we have many. All our resources are free. Participation in our program is free. I think that's the case of all the municipal certification programs in our network. So quick overview of these resources. The fellowship program on the upper left, we hire 13 to 15 college and university students from campuses across Connecticut who work full-time each summer, helping towns directly in a one-on-one support in implementing actions and applying for certification. We embed these fellows in the offices of our regional councils of government so that they're at the forefront of where towns meet and they're working kind of very directly at the local level. On the upper right, of course, we do workshops and training. Of course, we did them in person. Of course, we don't now. Of course, we hope to in the future. Bottom right, equity coaches. So I mentioned equity as a foundation. We're asking towns to look inside themselves, so to speak, and see who lives in their communities, create dialogue and connection with all members of the community, and actually co-create solutions. So we're not looking for a town to say, we know we have a population that's food insecure, this is how we will help them. We're looking and coaching a town on understanding how to connect with people who are food insecure and listen to what challenges those present, and then listen to what solutions those individuals suggest that would be helpful. So the coaches are really important on that because it's really kind of an opening of your mind to think in different ways. And we provide that free support. Each coach is assigned to a town kind of for that one-on-one work. In addition, we have really in-depth equity and anti-racism workshops that are 12-hour interactive sessions that municipal officials, staff, and residents participate in. And then over on the bottom left is kind of a very kind of messy looking slide with logos of many of our partners. So in addition to the network of municipal certification programs, Sustainable CT is really a network of all of these organizations in Connecticut that support this work in towns, and they provide kind of technical support for different actions within our program. One example, using the energy reduction action we talked about, both of the utilities, Eversource and United Aluminum in Connecticut, have a consultant who provides free energy benchmarking support services to any town in Connecticut. So we refer towns to that consultant. She and her students then help set up portfolio manager accounts in the EPA platform and create an automatic transfer of energy data from the utilities database into the portfolio manager account of the town, making it like this really robust data platform that we can tap into to understand and verify energy use reductions. This is probably the most exciting resource and support we provide to towns. Brad mentioned it, it's our community match fund. So we have partnered with a crowdfunding platform to create a way of funding sustainability projects in communities that is driven by the community and residents themselves, identifying what's important to them and articulating and leading the projects. So a resident will say, we are interested in using this space to create a community garden. It's a very quick crowdfunding, flexible vetting process that we do that can be up and running within a couple days. Their project aligns with our roadmap of actions. And then they're at work talking to neighbors and others in their community to support with crowdfunding dollars, and we are matching those dollars. So over the past 17 months, we've invested over $1.3 million in over 100 community-led projects that have been supported by almost 4,300 crowdfunding donors. So the figure on the left of 724,000 is the amount that residents and small businesses in this state have pledged $5, $10, $25 to support these projects that their fellow community members have articulated as being important for their communities. The figure on the far right, 610,000 approximately, are the dollars that Sustainable CT has matched for all those dollars that are raised by the community. So this is another manifestation of our view of equity and inclusion, kind of flipping the power dynamics on how money flows. Instead of a traditional municipal grants program where an entity like ours might say, all right, you can apply for funds to do X, Y, and Z. Your mayor will, or your town staff will submit a grant proposal, we'll review it, time, effort, blah, blah, blah. Instead, we go into the community and we say, what does your town need? What needs to happen in your neighborhood? Okay, cool. It aligns with our platform. We're going to support you with dollars, with crowdfunding, coaching, and so on. It's really exciting and powerful. And the towns, in addition, earn credit towards certification for these projects. So because it's so cool, I'm going to show you a few examples to kind of bring it to life, because this stuff can be kind of dry when you're talking about how the programs are developed. So here's an example of a project, BCCO, in Hartford, where they're basically taking used bike donations, training people in the neighborhood to learn how to repair them through BCCO and their tools there, and then giving a bike to folks who need them for transportation and mobility, teaching them about bike safety and all. It's amazing. Here's another project that's completed in New Haven. It's there we have a lot of state incentive dollars to improve energy efficiency of homes, as most program states do. Many residents don't know about them. So the Neighborhood Housing Services of New Haven set up this concierge program to basically walk door to door in neighborhoods and say, hey, here are some opportunities that are going to lower your costs for heating your homes and make them more pleasant and healthy places to live. We've had funded a lot of projects on bicycle and pedestrian trails, providing safer mobility, access to open space, connections between villages in different towns, lots of these throughout the state, lots of projects we've supported for composting and recycling, both in schools and community-wide. And here's, we've had a lot of projects that we've supported on community gardens. And this is a great example of an evolution of kind of the typical community garden project, which said, these guys, Love Fed, said, hey, let's actually create home farms. Let's build raised beds in inner city neighborhoods. Ask people what kind of food they want to grow. Get the seeds, teach them how to grow it. Have recipe and cooking lessons, talk about nutrition, and empower people to grow their own food. Amazingly powerful, and you can see the people having so much fun doing it as well. And this is the last example I'm going to give. As you saw, arts and culture is part of our roadmap, as is renovating public spaces. So here's a project in Hartford using a neglected lot where residents said, we want a place that's more beautiful, we want a place that's safe, and we want a place for our kids to play. So you can see the results of the cool mural and the little playground that's just a very neighborhood-based project. So those are some of the cool examples from the Community Match Fund. Now I'm going to move to the third kind of tier of our program. We talked about the roadmap, we talked about resources to implement actions, and this is certification, which is really kind of a very motivating factor for towns to take advantage of all these resources and opportunities. So I mentioned before, towns get certified when they've accomplished one action in each of the categories, done at least one of the required equity actions, or 3 in the case of silver, and achieved a threshold of points. Here's just a quick overview of our 17 communities that achieved certification just this fall. And these stories, so each picture there is a story of something that the town did to achieve certification, and you can see kind of the variety of things. So these are the stories that you're going to hear about for the rest of this lecture series, not all from Connecticut, but from communities across the country. You're going to hear about net zero communities, safe mobility for all, reinventing green spaces, and eco districts. And they're these stories that you've heard some of from the Community Match Fund, and some of these photos here are depicting of the amazing and vibrant things happening in communities all over the country. The certification, obviously visibility among peers and bragging rights and just pride in community is a big aspect of it. Here's our inaugural class of certified communities in 2018, standing at the annual convention of the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities in front of all their peers, probably holding their plaques. Here's just the broad picture of towns in Connecticut that are registered, 117 of our 169 towns and cities, and 61 are certified. Our website, true to kind of the municipal voice foundation of our program, is enables peer sharing. So for a certified community, you can click on one of those bubbles and actually read their certification point, see examples of what they did, a complete streets policy or sustainability in their zoning regs and so on. And this is our vision statement and the goal of what is all this about. This is what we're hoping to achieve. Communities that are thriving, resilient, collaborative, and forward-looking, building community and local economy, equitably promoting the health and well-being of current and future residents, and respecting the finite capacity of the natural environment. Didn't want to leave this out. Part of this importance of our program is that it's completely independently funded, which has helped us really focus on the municipal voice. There are no other agendas. It's for towns by towns and towns guiding this program. Some of the programs within our network, other states, are run by state agencies or at different levels. But again, all of them are focused on statewide programs that are focusing on creating change at the local level. So we're grateful for our growing list of funders in Connecticut. So that was the quick overview of what is a municipal certification program. In a minute, we'll hand it over to Lola to talk about our network, but I just wanted to kind of segue into that by adding a little bit more to what Brad said about why a network is so important to us. We started by gathering mayors together around a table and saying, what would be helpful for Connecticut? There's some really cool, amazing, inspiring, successful programs in other states. And we tapped into 5, 10 other state programs and showed them how they looked. This is how this one runs. This is what this one focuses on. This is how we could set up something here. And given that kind of overview of opportunity, our municipal leaders kind of set the vision for Connecticut's program. At a more practical level, when we were ready to launch our program, we have an incredibly interactive and powerful website, which we could have never built on our own. Sustainable Jersey, one of our partners in the network, has a really extensive website that they have essentially shared at a very low cost, the licensing rights with Sustainable CT and other states, a huge efficiency for us, a huge ability to kind of look across state programs with a similar lens. And I guess I'll just give one other example of the value of the partnership. We have this peer group of people running Sustainable Jersey or Massachusetts Green Communities or Minnesota Green Steps. And we can just pick up the phone and call someone there and ask them, like, what did you do when you were building out health actions? Do you have any examples for us? Or how did you handle this? And sometimes I gather them together for like what I call a flash consulting session. I say, we're struggling with something in our program development. Who can get on a call next week at 2 and be my consultant and throw tomatoes at this idea? Tell me how it's going to be impossible and hard. Tell me what I need to be worried about and pay attention to, and help me just kind of think through it before we launch and go forward. They helped us do that flash consulting with the Community Match Fund, and it was amazingly helpful. So I'll end with, again, building on what Brad said. Our logo there, our tagline is local actions of statewide impact. The network helps us take our focus on change at the local level to scale that nationally and kind of expand that tagline to local actions, statewide impact, and hopefully national transformation. So I will end it there and thank you for your patience.
Thanks so much, Lynn. We have a few questions that I think we should try to tackle now, and then I'll invite Lola to share remarks. But Let me start with one that I'm going to try to combine. There's two questions that relate to funding, particularly around the crowdfunding. So one person's asking, do you know if there's anything like this in New York State? Her Climate Smart Communities Coordinator and she are looking for help in getting the town and community more involved. And relatedly, from Maryland, someone from the audience asks whether the matching fund was integral to getting the other funding that you shared already.
Okay, so yeah, New York State, it sounds like you're familiar with Climate Smart Communities. We work closely with Dazzle Ekblad there. As far as the Community Match Fund, well, they have a lot of money in New York, but they're using a different model of dispensing it. So I do not believe they have kind of like a crowdfunding Climate Smart Communities match, although Dazzle is watching our progress with that, and who knows. So hopefully that answers that question. Of course, these platforms are available outside of the certification programs for anyone raising funds for sustainability projects. And the platform we're using, the partner is called Patronicity. Maybe someone can post that in the chat, patronicity.com. So you could tap into that and see there are a lot of states with similar programs like this.
There's a couple more questions. Let me share. One is asking for more about the equity coaches for sustainability work. Is it a workshop or one-on-one coaching with the municipalities?
Okay, the equity coaching is one-on-one coaching. We match a coach with a town sustainability team, and they get on the phone or meet in person in the old days and say, what are you thinking? Who lives in your community? And often the towns say, we're 98% white, we don't have diversity. And the coach begins there by saying, okay, let's look into figuring out who lives in your community beyond, what other kind of identities the population has, and how to support and connect with them.
Great. Here's a couple questions about the certification. One is, how do you foresee competition between different municipal certification options affecting the exchange of information and practices?
So I guess you would mean competition within Connecticut. There are a few other programs that kind of certify towns. What we like to do is talk with those programs and weave the goals together through our actions, and then kind of co-brand them. So if there was originally there used to be a clean energy communities program in Connecticut that was very focused on energy stuff. We worked with them to build those same goals into our action roadmap. So a town could be doing the action and get points in either program, and we would kind of co-brand and co-support. So we handle competition, I guess, by ideally partnership and leveraging.
Great. There's another question around the certification. Once certified, are communities always in the program, or does that expire? Do they require to continue implementing new projects each year? And then from the same person, a couple questions about, does a partner manage the interns, and how do you ensure that the towns use the interns only for sustainability projects?
Okay, so the expiration, it's a 3-year certification. At the end, it expires and they must resubmit for certification. That's typical for all of the programs in our network. They may have different timeframes. So our first cohort was certified in 2018. At the end of this year, they will evaporate unless they recertified, and we think most of them will. So that's the kind of having to do something new and continuing to do that. As for the fellows, the interns, they're placed at the Council of Governments. They're supervised both by a member of our team and the staff at the Council of Governments. They're working on sustainability projects. Some of those align very directly with the regional planning work that these Council of Governments are doing. So I guess if a town wants help with something chances are there's some alignment with our very broad roadmap. And we found that the requests of towns for the use of support from fellows are very concrete. So they might be, hey, we've already done all this stuff. We could get certified easily. So the fellow does essentially an audit of our actions against what the town has already done and determines opportunities for new activity and new sustainability actions.
We've got a couple more questions, so I'm just going to ask you one more, Lynn, and then we'll save some for after Lola's presentation. But the last one that I'd like to ask you now is, what are a few things that were especially enticing to communities that made them want to join the program?
Yeah, that's a great question. So people often ask how we recruit towns. I would say the number one thing that made this program attractive is that we included, as we said, a representative from every single town and city in Connecticut when we were creating the program. Either their mayor, their town staff, a resident, or perhaps their regional health district was representing them. As such, every town created and co-owns the program. So they were chomping at the bit to join before we even launched, because it's not our program, it's their program. And that has been the driving force and value. And we continue to refine the program and adapt the actions based on input from the towns and communities of what's most useful for them. So that kind of for towns by towns mantra that we use, I think, has been the secret and the key to towns seeing it as something of value.
Thanks so much, Lynn. I think we should switch gears so that we can hear from Lola next, and then we'll return back to some more questions. Let me first share a little background. Lola Schoenrich is the coordinator of the Sustainable States Network and serves as the co-director of Minnesota Green Step Cities, which she helped launch in 2010. She is the vice president for communities at the Great Plains Institute, where she has worked since 2008. Lola has over 35 years of experience in energy policy and community energy initiatives. She has extensive background in bringing diverse groups of people together to craft energy policy and implement projects in networks, coalitions, and working teams. Lola, please take this mic now and we'll hear your experience.
You can hear me?
We can.
Okay, let me share my screen here. You're seeing my slides, I trust?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you. I'm so thrilled that you all are doing this webinar series, and I'm really pleased to be a co-sponsor of it, and so pleased to be here. And thank you, Brad and Lynn and Colleen and everyone else that put work into this. I want to start with describing the Sustainable States Network. It's a network of 15 state sustainability and climate programs in 14 states. There are 2 programs in New York State. And this slide is wrong because we just added the Green Communities program run by the Atlanta Regional Commission last week. So the Georgia program didn't make it onto the map yet. The network first came together in 2015, and through our collective work, our vision is to build a future where sustainability is the norm for all communities. And I want to point out that together, the 15 sustainable state members engage over 2,200 municipalities, counties, and in Minnesota, the program Minnesota Green Step Cities is used by 4 tribal nations. All of the Sustainable States members are like Sustainable CT in that they're all statewide, they're voluntary, they're comprehensive, they provide direction to communities, they build capacity in some way, and they celebrate accomplishments. They're beyond compliance programs, if you will, even though a few are run by the technical assistance arm of regulatory agencies, state regulatory agencies. So they're not about whether your wastewater plant is meeting effluent requirements, but rather the things that you can do to make your wastewater plant more efficient, for instance. They're able to tailor national best practices to what's possible and legal in each state. And they make connections, as you saw with Sustainable CT, to the lots and lots of people in a state that can help and support communities with training, with support, with resources, with funding. All the programs share the vision of making sustainability the norm for all the communities in there that are part of the program and in the state. And so in addition to helping the communities that are part of the program, they are typically designed with behavior change science in mind, with a goal of changing the broader social understanding of the role local governments have in being green, in sustainability on climate, or whatever language they use. And then, Lynn, as you pointed out, the role of local governments in ensuring equity for all residents. Some of these programs are run by state agencies. It's often a regulatory agency or an energy agency. Some are run by centers at university like Sustainable CT, and a couple are run by nonprofit organizations. And most of them have multiple partners. There are a lot of different players. There's lots of levels with Sustainable States Network and these programs. So I want to spend a minute sort of teasing apart who does what. The local governments and the community volunteers obviously are on the front lines of making change in their communities and making people's lives better. The state programs like Sustainable CT that are members of Sustainable States Network directly support those staff members, the local elected officials, and the community volunteers in their state. And the network supports and connects people like Lynn, who work directly for or with the program or are in the many different partner organizations. I want to spend 1 minute talking about networks, because networks are different from other ways that people align to work together. Networks are basically individuals who are aligned around a shared vision or a goal or a really knotty problem. And since they're about people who align around goals that are big, long-term, and the systems that they seek to change are multifaceted, networks can be really long-lasting, but they can also be really chaotic and messy. And people vote with their feet in a network, so networks tend to align around what people involved are most interested in and what they want to do together. And Sustainable States Network is no exception. Networks evolve over time. They start with people being totally thrilled to meet one another and to share their experiences and their ideas. And Sustainable States Network has evolved and is now in engaged in joint multi-state projects with national partners. We work in the 3 areas you see. We're about sharing, people sharing and learning together and building a community of practice of these state level sustainability and climate programs. We align resources, build tools. Lynn gave the example of the web page. And then we are doing multi-state projects together. Within that landscape of possibilities, the members of Sustainable States Network have particularly aligned around equity, climate mitigation, and clean energy, and energy efficiency. They're interested, people are interested in helping to expand local programs in other states. And there is actually, interestingly, interest in starting programs in Iowa, Nebraska, Colorado, and Ohio. And then there are emerging issues that come up, such as health, which we're all familiar with this year. I want to give you a sampling of the projects that we've been working on and doing together. We have an equity project, a multi-state community energy challenge. We're working on developing several new initiatives, one on climate action work planning that I'll talk a bit about, EV ready communities, embedding a national program called Soul Smart that's about communities being solar ready. Lynn, I see you had that on your list of logos, and a project related to health equity. I'm going to start with the equity initiative because that is the longest running Sustainable State network-wide project. Most of the state level programs in the country are not like Sustainable CT in that they're new. They are instead 8 or 10 years old or even older. Interestingly, many of them started around the same time. They started at a time when sustainability was a thing for London and New York City and San Francisco, but not for the surrounding suburban communities or the rural communities or any smaller city or town. And so they share this goal of bringing sustainability to everyone. They were designed at a time when equity just wasn't front and center for local governments as it is today. And so most of the programs are retooling now to incorporate racial and social equity in their best practices, in their actions, and in some cases as a requirement for certification or recognition. The Sustainable States Equity Work Group is the longest lasting one. People started by learning and doing training together and to better understand the role of local governments over decades in creating the racial disparities we see today. And then over the past couple of years, we've had a national consultant that we're working with who has been helping state programs evaluate their programs and look at ways that they can incorporate equity into the existing program structure. She's developed shared tools and resources and done network-wide training. And then in this year, we've been working on developing, like many organizations, a network-wide equity statement and goals. And and metrics, sorry. The Community Energy Challenge is a fun one. It's funded by the New York Community Trust, and we are partnering with ACEEE, which is a national energy efficiency and clean energy nonprofit organization. It's primarily a research organization, and each year they do a state scorecard and a city scorecard of the 100 core center cities of the biggest municipal areas in the country. And we use the ACEEE city scorecard. They have a self-scoring tool to evaluate 30 smaller cities participating in these programs in 5 states. And I actually want to, I guess later I'll put the links to the big city scorecard and their press release on small cities in the chat, or if one of you has it, perhaps you could do that so people could find it if they wanted. Our work led us to the conclusion that the smaller cities, or ACEEE, the smaller cities scored quite well compared to the big cities, and really demonstrating that small cities can be leaders as well. And it also pointed out some areas of shared weakness across many of the cities across the 5 states. And so now we're in a phase of doing technical assistance on building efficiency, planning and goal setting, and vehicle electrification. Through this scorecard and the Community Energy Challenge project, we identified a couple of areas of where communities, many were had shared challenges. And one is that many smaller communities, and big ones too, they're challenged in setting clean energy or climate goals. They don't have the data. They don't know how to get it. They're not sure what to do with it if they had it. Some communities have goals that were set by local elected officials who didn't really have any clear idea of how those goals would be met. Staff members are taking actions, but they don't know if they add up to the goal. And they don't really know how to track progress and make adjustments along the way. And of course, all of that is important if communities are going to do their part in solving the climate crisis. So we are in the process of developing a project to create the templates and tools and assistance that will help communities set goals and align the actions that they take to the goals that are of particular interest to that community. With EVs, that's another area where there's interest, and communities have a distinct role to play in getting the EV charging infrastructure in place, and they can be important influencers as they add electric vehicles to their fleet. My favorite example is that because local governments have a lot to say about the nature of development in their communities, the local government is really the only entity that can ensure and require or cajole developers to make sure that EV charging is available in the parking lot of new development. So we are developing what we hope will be a national certification program, EV ready communities modeled after the Soul Smart program. We're piloting it through several of the communities involved in the Community Energy Challenge. And then finally, health is obviously a big issue right now, and it turns out that your zip code is a bigger determinant of health outcomes than individual behaviors, like whether you smoke or what you eat. And this is another emerging issue, that a multi-state initiative that aims to build on the good work that's already being done in several states, Wisconsin, New Jersey, for example, to really educate and support local governments in considering the health outcomes of the policies they pass in all of their policies and initiatives. And of course, the outcome that we all hope for is tested strategies that are adopted across many communities, better quality of life, better economies, and a cleaner environment. Happy to answer questions, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you so much, Lola. We only have 4 minutes left, so I'm going to try to see if we can get some quick replies. And this one really is for any of you. It is a question from Carol asking, can you speak further or give resources on behavior change science related to sustainability and climate science?
There's a lot of it. And I don't have it up my, like a particular reference up my sleeve right now, but I bet y'all at Yale are doing work in this area.
Marissa King just published a book called Social Chemistry, looking at networks and how they're developed, and there's some interesting stuff in there. It's not specifically on sustainability, it's more on how networks influence. There's also another person, Jane Y. Skillern, who's done a number of articles on networks and how they can help make change. In terms of what changes behavior, you know, there's a lot of work being done on habits and nudges and things like that. I'm not an expert in those areas, but I think we're seeing, particularly from Lola's and Lynn's types of efforts, networks coming together to help make it possible for there to be change on the ground and to have that change on the ground magnified across multiple locations.
Thanks, Brad. Let's try to get one more question in. This is coming from Heather asking, and her municipality has a large aging population. How do you suggest engaging with that part of our community?
That might be a good question for Lynn.
Yeah, I'll hop in. So that's something our equity coaches have helped with and a lot of towns have done in their equity action. It might start with the social services coordinator for the town, actually going to senior centers and senior communities and talking to the residents, often face-to-face when possible, or telephone is probably a better strategy than online for certain populations. So yeah, we could take that offline if you want to. We could give you some great examples from Connecticut towns. You can contact us at info@sustainablect.org if you'd like to hear more.
Thank you so much, Lynn. I'm going to just wrap up our session with encouraging our audience, which we had nearly 100 people here today, to return next Thursday, where we'll focus on net zero communities as the second in our series of the 5 events that we'll have in this series. And we will, we just put in the chat where you can register for the rest of the series, but you could also go there for slides from today's event and a recording from today's event. And to thank Lola, Lynn, and Brad for kicking us off and really an inspiring series. We're so excited to be part of this with you on this journey. So thank you all so much. Bye, everybody. See you next week.